and welcome to Freedom Fighters Code Gray. This is a show where we discuss human trafficking, an issue that's taking place in our own backyard. Now, today's episode may be triggering for some viewers as we will be dealing with a discussion around the trafficking and exploitation of persons. If you need information and support as it relates to human trafficking, please call the human trafficking hotline number that's available 24/7 at 1-833-900-1010. What role does the financial sector play in addressing human trafficking? And what can financial services do to aid and support someone who has been exploited in their healing journey? Well, today I am joined by Gilberto Cedolia, the Director of Anti-Money Laundering Compliance at Scotiabank, who will be discussing this topic. Welcome, Gilberto.
Thanks, Michaela. Happy to be here.
So just to start off our episode today, I would love to hear about how you got involved in anti-trafficking work. What was your journey like? What was kind of that initiating point that got you to be a part of addressing anti-trafficking through the financial sector?
Yeah, well, I have to go back to 2019. I just started a new role, and Scotiabank was one of two banks in Canada invited to a pilot project by an organization called FAST. FAST stands for Finance Against Slavery and Trafficking, and they're based out of the UN University Center for Policy Research. And it's really an initiative that looks to mobilize the financial sector to combat human trafficking through various targets. The ask at the time was rather simple. It was, can we open 5 bank accounts for survivors by the end of that year? So I think we got the ask around late summer, and we had until December of that year to open 5 accounts. And we were fortunate enough that through FAST, we were paired with one of the leading non-government organizations or NGOs in Canada that supported survivors in the Salvation Army, and working closely with their Deborah's Gate program. And so we quickly learned that the ask was not as simple as just opening 5 accounts, but that survivors really needed a program that took a survivor-centered approach and a trauma-informed approach to banking. And so from there, we quickly established a referral program between a large bank and an NGO. It was really the first one in Canada. And the reason why we do that is so that we can actually rely on the NGO partner to provide that vetting and assessment of survivors prior to referring them to the bank. So like I mentioned, I was in a new role at the time. Everything was new learning to me. We quickly put together the framework for what our program is today.
Wow, that's incredible. And I'm just so excited to hear more about, in particular, the support services that you offer through banking for those individuals who have experienced exploitation. You mentioned that this FAST program asks you to create 5 accounts. And I'm wondering, to date, now we're at 2023, how is Scotiabank coming alongside individuals who've experienced exploitation, and what sorts of services do you offer?
Yeah, I can start with the second part of that question. So the program today is called the Financial Access Program, and essentially it involves 3 pillars. The first pillar is the products and services that we offer. The second one is financial literacy guidance, and third is that we deliver all of this through specially trained financial advisors at participating branches across the country. So on the product side, we offer a premium checking account. Essentially, it's the same checking account that a Scotiabank employee would have. We offer free for 12 months. We provide access to a savings account, which is also free. And there's also the option to obtain a credit card, a no annual fee credit card, with an unsecured limit of up to $1,000. So we really want to ensure that we provide sort of a baseline suite of products that we've tweaked, especially for participants in this program. The other piece to this that is, I would say, vital is the financial literacy guidance that we actually provide as well when we're opening new accounts for survivors. And what that looks like is an overview of the accounts that we're actually opening. So again, if someone has been outside of the financial system for a while, they might not know what they can do with their new checking account, all the new features, all the new functionality that's embedded in those accounts. as well as some fundamentals of banking, just as best practices. So budgeting, savings, protection from fraud. And it's really meant to be more of a conversation starter, right? So think about some best practices as you're now using your new accounts. And finally, all of this is delivered through, like I mentioned, specially trained financial advisors. So they're actually provided with human trafficking awareness and sensitivity trainings to have better conversations, to help normalize information that they might have to discuss with survivors in private, and also set appropriate boundaries, and leave survivors with that compassionate challenge as they continue on their journey to financial empowerment.
I really appreciate and value the approach that you have taken to supporting individuals in these ways, because not only are you creating access to bank accounts and using financial services, but you're really empowering folks with the tools that they need to manage finances, utilize those services, understand the services, and then beyond that, ensuring that the folks that are supporting them with opening those accounts or making changes, all of those things are sensitive and aware and trauma-informed. So it's really a trauma-informed, empowered approach to banking, which I think is absolutely brilliant. Now, some of the folks who have experienced exploitation face barriers of many kind once exiting a situation of trafficking. And so when we're talking specifically about the financial sector, what would you say are some of the barriers that you've seen that individuals experience when, trying to access finance or as it relates to finance? And what are you doing at Scotiabank to create more access, more opportunities, and more support for these folks?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the barriers are many, right? But the two main ones I would say from a financial perspective are lack of credit and lack of ID. So, we know that survivors, the primary exploitation, when we're talking about human trafficking, it's sex and labor trafficking. And I think, in Canada, we see a high prevalence of sex trafficking. So the exploitation is very obviously sexual, physical, mental in nature. It's abuse of their person. But there's often that secondary abuse, which comes in many forms, right? So there's the economic and financial abuse that we also see. And this could mean that, if a survivor was banked prior to exploitation, they could have had their bank accounts compromised by their trafficker or hijacked by their trafficker. If they had access to credit, oftentimes that credit could have been used to make purchases fraudulently or force the survivor into coerced debt. That often leaves them with an uphill battle once they exit trafficking to reestablish their whole financial identity, right? And sort of repair and rebuild their credit profile. And that's something that, even the survivors don't even sometimes know how many credit cards or how many purchases have been made using their name fraudulently. So on the credit side, we're taking a risk-based approach to assist survivors with access to credit to help begin rebuilding their credit profiles. We're also exploring collaborations with external partners on how to remove coerced debt from a survivor's credit report, which may limit their access to credit more fully. After health and safety and safeguarding the survivor, providing shelter, is reestablishing identification documents. And again, identification documents could be taken from them as an added measure of control. So we definitely see coercion and control, the impacts of that on the post-abuse life of the survivor in their recovery journey. And so through our program, we're taking a couple steps to help promote financial inclusion by addressing the lack of credit and the lack of ID. On the ID piece, what we've done is we've created a pilot approach to banking undocumented survivors. And what that looks like essentially is receiving a letter of reference from the referring NGO on behalf of their client that they're referring to us, in addition to a personal reference. And with those two documents, we can open a basic bank account. We give them up to 12 months to come back to us with stronger ID. So typically this looks like a government issued photo ID. And once we refresh their account within that 12-month timeframe, we're then able to offer up our full suite of products and services.
These services that you're offering, this access that you're creating for folks is truly groundbreaking. I think of various folks that I know who were entrenched in situations of trafficking, and finances were a barrier to exit because of the debt that was potentially racked up, or they couldn't have access to their own bank account to make those independent choices and purchases that they needed to be able to exit that situation. Or I know folks who are in their healing journey and similarly don't have ID. And so providing that service where they're able to access that account and begin to, as you were sharing, take those steps that they want to engage to be a member of society, that, and to enjoy the services that are available for folks in the community, I think is really incredible. And so I can just only imagine the amount of lives that these services will impact over time as folks, are engaged with these things that you're offering.
Yeah, thanks, Michaela. I'll just add there. We actually shared the ID approach with our banking regulator, FINTRAC, to say, hey, just a heads up, this is something that we're comfortable doing. We want to share it with you as a new practice that we've put in place, because of course it will affect our KYC requirements, right? When we have to ID customers to open bank accounts. Subsequently, FINTRAC shared that guidance with the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. And this past February 22nd, so Human Trafficking Awareness Day in Canada, they actually issued joint guidance, effectively allowing for banks to look at other types of reliable sources of information to obtain identification documents on behalf of vulnerable groups such as survivors of human trafficking. So effectively, this approach can now be taken not just by Scotiabank, but by any financial institution looking to put in place a financial inclusion program for vulnerable groups.
Wow, this is just absolutely incredible. This is, innovative, groundbreaking work that is breaking down systemic barriers that folks face in their healing journey to say, you are worthy, you have dignity, you have, the ability to have this bank account and make those financial choices and have that financial freedom. And so I'm so grateful for the great work that you're doing, and I'm excited to hear more about it after we take a short break.
Looking for the best way to get the Major League Baseball games you want to watch? Rogers Super Sports Pack has you covered. With MLB Extra Innings, you'll have a premium ticket to out-of-market regular season games with all games available in HD. Don't miss the action from the games you want from both the American and National Leagues. MLB Extra Innings, part of the Super Sports Pack. For only $35.95 a month, Rogers customers get all this for one all-inclusive price. Order using your remote starting on channel 431 or visit Rogers.com today.
And welcome back to Freedom Fighters Code Gray, a show where we discuss human trafficking. Today, I'm joined by Gilberto from Scotiabank, and we're discussing the connection between the financial sector and human trafficking. So to start off this segment of the show, Gilberto, I would love to better understand the role that you see the financial sector playing in the fight against human trafficking.
Thanks, Michaela. I think the financial sector has a huge role to play, in combating trafficking. I would say it probably comes down to sort of three different ways. One is disruption, another is prevention, and the third, like the program that we offer, is through remedy to enhance financial inclusion. Canada has some world-leading public-private partnerships between banks and a regulator, civil society organizations, that have really been quite successful in increasing financial intelligence when we're looking for specific transactions linked to offenses prior to them becoming illicit proceeds of money laundering. Two such examples are Project Protect, which launched in 2015, which looked specifically at indicators of sex trafficking in financial transactions. And the second one, which was a Scotiabank-led project that we launched in 2021, is called Project Shadow. And that looks again at financial indicators indicative of online child sexual exploitation, which is a derivative of trafficking. And so these two projects, and there's others, I think there's 7 total now, that we've led in Canada, really help to provide that financial intelligence to our regulators, which then makes its way to law enforcement, right? And that's kind of how the financial crime value chain is done through the banking system. So the better that we're able to detect these transactions, the more that we can actually disrupt these illicit financial flows from occurring, right? And that in itself aids in prevention from using the financial system as a conduit for this type of activity. And then again, I would harken back to the remedy that we provide through financial inclusion, right? And I think financial inclusion is both prevention and remedy. One of the stats that I am aware of is that it takes 6 or 7 attempts for a survivor to fully exit human trafficking, right? And that could be for various reasons. However, we know that not having access to the formal financial system increases reliance on the informal or underground economy for financial assistance, right? Now, in best case scenario, informal economy would be leveraging friends and family for financial assistance. If that's not present, you might have to go to someone else, and that might, in itself, increase vulnerabilities, which then increases re-exploitation risk, right? And so financial inclusion, especially for survivor of trafficking, really helps to mitigate that, and hopefully, can lower one of those attempts to fully exit trafficking completely.
Wow. I really appreciate the words that use financial inclusion and just you reiterating the importance of ensuring that folks who have experienced exploitation have access to these services, because it also, something important you highlight, prevents re-trafficking, right? And someone who's trafficked may exit and then experience re-trafficking. That's quite common in Canada. So to be able to help stop that cycle of exploitation by providing folks with a service like finances is so important. And as you're sharing these things about what the financial sector can do and the role that the financial sector can have, I'm thinking, okay, how do we get this in the hands of every employee who works at a banking institution in Canada? And as someone, Gilberto, who works in the banking sector, the financial sector, why do you think it's important for people who are working in this space to know about human trafficking, and to not only know about it, but to do something in the role that they have to help fight this crime?
Yeah, definitely for the financial sector, it's so important because banks in Canada have such a presence right across the country, right? So, our interactions with our customers and our service to our communities, we have such a presence that, we can also almost be like eyes and ears on the ground, especially when we see something suspicious physically, even before we see it through our financial transactions, right? So, one thing to know is that human trafficking can happen anywhere to anyone. Really, doesn't matter, what walk of life they come from. We know that exploitation has no bounds there. And second, that for the financial industry, human trafficking is a financially motivated crime, and the financial sector is actually vulnerable in itself to misuse by criminals and organized crime syndicates. And so, the more awareness that we have as a sector, the better that we can actually disrupt this activity, as we see it, right? And like I mentioned, there's the physical signs, It could be someone coming into a branch. It could be an older man, younger woman. There's a classic example where the young woman doesn't do any of the actual speaking. The older man will open an account in her name and fill out all the information on her behalf, and then she just signs the documents, right? That could look extremely suspicious, and we have processes in place on how to raise a concern, raise a flag when we see something like that. The other instances, like I mentioned, through some of our public-private partnerships, is being able to spot the financial transactions that are actually occurring in our financial ecosystem every single day, right? And how we're able to, through better detection techniques, be able to seek those out and then disclose them to our regulator, who then, hopefully discloses to law enforcement in a timely fashion. And so it's so important because we have, again, that presence right across the country, right at ground level, and we can actually see if we notice anything suspicious, we can definitely do something about it.
It's so interesting how you broke that down, because you highlighted the frontline nature of, folks who are working in the financial sector, but also what can be gleaned from the data, if you will, or the transactions that is happening in order to detect, stop and respond to trafficking incidents. And then, of course, as we've focused a lot on the show, the opportunities for people who are working in the banking space to increase financial inclusion, increase access to financial support, and help to break down some of those barriers folks who are facing in the community who have been impacted by human trafficking. Now, right. Gilberto, you know so much about trafficking. You were just sharing, a lot even about what's been happening in terms of, that anyone can be trafficked, regardless of age, ethnicity, gender, all of these things, right? It can happen to anyone. And you were shedding some important realities about how trafficking happens in Canada. And you have gotten involved just really in the last several years when you mentioned you started that new role in 2019. So what have you personally learned since engaging this work about trafficking?
I think my biggest learning was just the scale of harm and prevalence of human trafficking, especially sex trafficking in Canada. Prior to engaging in this work, I always thought sex trafficking is one of those things that happens elsewhere, but not in our backyard. And while our numbers are still relatively small compared to other countries, we know that human trafficking touches small urban, rural communities as well as large urban cities. And so that's something to me that was eye-opening. I mentioned that stat before about the average of 6 or 7 attempts to exit trafficking, and that's something that it just really breaks my heart, when I hear that. And I just want to point out to say that I'm not saying that providing a bank account is the be-all and end-all, right? But it's just another tool in the toolbox, and part of our process is obviously right from day one pairing a survivor with a financial advisor within their community. And I think that's so important. I read a quote the other day on LinkedIn, very short and simple, but it said relational abuse requires relational support, right? And so if we can have that extra person in the survivor support network by way of a financial advisor that they can trust and they can go to for advice, I think that's so crucial. And so, yeah, the learnings have just been eye-opening for me, and I'm hoping that, again, through our financial inclusion initiative and others in Canada that I know are working concurrently, we can help make a difference.
Thank you for taking the time to just reflect on your own personal learnings. I think those are really valuable things to hear for folks who are tuning in as well, right? Like the vastness of this crime, that it happens in anywhere, all across Canada. But then also how this is just one piece of assisting someone in their healing journey, and that it really, takes a community of various kinds of supports to aid someone. And so each person who's listening may be working in a different sector, whether that's the healthcare sector, right, or education system, and all of these, in all of these places, there's something that someone can do to help the fight against human trafficking. Now, you've mentioned so many great programs and services that Scotiabank is offering, and I'm just wondering if you could take some time to share, where can people find out more? Where can people access these services and reach out for support?
Yeah, so just quickly to recap a little bit, it is very much a referral program. So I would say first and foremost, we are looking to accept new NGO partners. And because our program is very scalable, if you happen to be in a community where we don't have a branch, we can always train a branch and get that service going in your community. Another thing I share with our NGO partners is we know that survivors often might work with an agency in one province and then relocate to another province. It could be relocating back to their home province. And they could be moving to a city or town where that NGO might not have a physical presence. That's also fine. We can assist by getting a bank online and financial advisors trained in that community as well. So for more information, you can visit. Actually, the best way to do it is just to put it in a search, a web search. Scotiabank Financial Access Program should take you right to the page, and you can see contact information. Our email is financial.access@scotiabank.com. It actually just comes directly to me. Or you can reach out to me directly at gilberto.cedolia@scotiabank.com.
Well, Gilberto, thank you so much for taking the time to share today about Scotiabank, the financial sector, and human trafficking. And truly, I am so thankful. I am so thankful for the innovative and groundbreaking work that you and your team are doing to reduce barriers, to create access, and provide folks with opportunities through financial services, and also to prevent sex trafficking from happening, to give people the tools they need to detect it in the workplace. There are so many great things that you are doing to support folks who are impacted by this crime and to address human trafficking in Canada. Now, if you are viewing the show today and you are in a situation of immediate danger, please call 911. If you are looking for information and support as it relates to human trafficking, you can call the confidential 24/7 human trafficking hotline number at 1-833-900-1010. Again, that's 1-833-900-1010. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in this episode today. We hope to catch you next time on Freedom Fighters Code Grey.